Hey guys, this is Katie from Moonflower Moments. So I'm joining y'all on a really beautiful Sunday evening. The last bits of light are still out. I've just had a really productive and wonderful weekend. And I felt like sharing the decks that I use for when my heart is open. So I was talking to a therapist friend of mine a few months ago, and she had shared with me a list of different categories for emotions that she likes to bring into therapy sessions with her clients. And these particular categories come from Brene Brown and her book Atlas of the Heart. So it's a different way of looking at emotions, and so I thought I would walk you through what Brene Brown lists as the categories for when our hearts are open, and then also share you the decks that I use for the different emotional states that she describes. So this is my second video within this series. The first video that I did was decks for when life is good, and it's one of my favorite videos that I have ever filmed. So I'll leave a link in the description box below to this one, to that one, because this one is my second one. So with that being said, when I think about when the heart is open, we of course tend to think about the heart being open in a place of receiving and giving love. So I'm going to start off there, and then I'm going to break off into some of the other categories that you might not always think of as being associated with the heart being open, but they do paradoxically still make sense. So according to Brene Brown, love is a preoccupying and strong desire for further connections, which form powerful bonds, intimacy, which leads, of course, to commitment and loyalty. So I thought about that powerful and that preoccupying, strong desire for connection. That seemed to be the root word that I was working off of. And so to illustrate that particular feeling and what that feels like to me, I have selected the Tarot of Love. Oops, sorry. Tarot of Light. I think it used to be called Tarot of Love. I'm pretty sure that was the thing. It's Tarot of Light. Here we go. So when I think of love, like we said, we think about the root word of connection. And so I thought about this deck because the way that it depicts some of the harder words in the deck, such as this is Five of Cups, which is traditionally known for like grief and heartbreak, and it tends to be a card heavily associated with grief for me. We have the word sorrow here, and instead of this individual being by themselves, which is the typical depiction of the Five of Cups, this individual is being held by another person, or this is a facet of herself and multiple parts of herself, but I really see it as like a group of people coming together to support this woman. And so I think that that's an interesting thing because there are multiple cards in this deck that portray something like this concept of coming together for stronger connection, and that connection being rooted in something deeper, something that is much more intimate, that suggests a sense of loyalty. So the Knight of Hearts right here, of course, is the Knight of Cups, and his keyword is romance. So he is a romantic guy, right? But he's searching for that connection. He's not usually the idealist that I see in the Knight of Cups. He wants that romance, he wants that connection, and his eyes are open on his wings, looking for that romance. You know, the Knight of Stars, this would be the Knight of Wands. He's not just hastily running away, he's an adventurer, and through his adventures, he's able to make deep connections with individuals. And so this deck feels like love for me. I think too that through our desire for love, we tend to really kind of gloss over some things that we need to see like head on, right? Like we tend to gloss over some of the red flags. And though I do think that this deck has some harder cards, such as the Four of Cups with depression, I think a lot of the cards are portrayed as a little bit softer. So this is the Four of Trees, which represents in this deck the Four of Pentacles. And while most of the time we think about the Four of Pentacles being like a little bit miserly or just representing like a strong, solid foundation, this word represents growth, right? So we're still seeking for something outside of ourselves, and we're trying to look for the beauty in the world in order to have that firm foundation to grow from. I think this deck also reminds me of love because of some particular moments that I've had with it. So at my birthday party over the summer, I got together with a couple of friends and also my husband. And we sat down and we built a beautiful altar and really just celebrated my birthday in a very like wholesome way. We played some songs from our playlist and then guessed like what cards would be which tarot cards. And I think at that moment in my life, I was looking for opportunities to let people in. I am someone who really struggles to let people know about my music taste. It's something that I'm definitely working on. And so the fact that I was able to sit down and just share in the beauty of music, which is something that I tend to be a little bit insecure about, really did show me feeling that preoccupying and strong desire for that further connection. And by doing that, I was able to find and to foster like stronger bonds with other people. And so I think that moment was very transformative to me because I felt like my heart was open and I was able to fully embrace that search for more because I was in a place where I felt safe. And I thought that those deeper bonds and then the intimacy of that would come from that. So this is the Eight of Angels, which is the Eight of Swords. I appreciate that it is said with the word confusion instead of like trappedness or feeling like helpless. Confusion seems to be something that's manageable, right? And it's something that through your relationships with other people, you're able to break through. I feel like this is a deck that is steady and it's a deck that would consistently be by your side if you need support. And I love that I pulled the Two of Cups for that as I'm saying that. It feels like a very Two of Cups kind of deck, and the way that it is here not for moments, but it's here for the long run to really support you through some of those harder moments of your life. And I think that's what love is, right? Is the searching for that connection. You find that connection, you build the powerful bonds, you build that intimacy, and that person feels like that safe place for you that you can go to them with a wide open heart. And, you know, instead of seeing like the Three of Swords as like a grief moment, we see it as a moment of where we need to have clarification with the other person. So it's a lovely deck, I think, for the moment of love. Two of Trees, we have flexibility. Instead of just planning, we have to be flexible to receive that love. You know, the Teacher for the Hierophant represents guidance. I mean, what better example of love than someone who is willing to make that powerful commitment to engage with you and to teach you. So this was Tarot of Light. I believe it was formerly known as like Tarot of Love. I didn't realize that. I mean, I did realize it, but I didn't recognize that until I sat down to share that. So that would be my love deck. So on the flip side of that is something that's a little bit more paradoxical, and that is the feeling of lovelessness. And I've chosen for lovelessness the Wildwood Tarot. And it's not because this deck makes me feel loveless, it's because it encourages me to seek that love. So according to Brene Brown, she uses Bell Hooks's definition for lovelessness. And according to Bell Hooks and then also to Brene Brown, lovelessness stems from a deep sense of injustice and systemic oppression. So when we're searching for something outside of ourselves, but we're not able to find what we need, we're not able to be met with an open heart. We have that open heart, but other people do not. And so we feel like the world is loveless. We feel like the world is unfair. So my mind went to the Wildwood with this one because of like keywords like this. This is Six of Stones, which would be Pentacle for exploitation. And I think that's an interesting concept of some people have robbed the earth too much. We have like these hives behind us. We've robbed the earth too much, that we've caused like these fires in the background, and we're not able to really engage with the world in a natural capacity anymore. So there is a sense of lovelessness to that in the way that we're looking outside of ourselves for assistance, but because of the way that capitalism is structured and other oppressive systems, we're not able to access what we actually need, nor do we actually see that what we need is right in front of us. And so I find that the Wildwood is really good on helping me when I'm feeling like I need to go outside of myself. There are a lot of themes that are built within this deck that tie us into nature, and I think if we were tied into nature more, we would oftentimes feel like there's more outside of ourselves, and we would be able to handle that feeling of lovelessness, of feeling like the world is not like a warm place, if we were just able to build those connections that are already prevalent in nature. So that's why I chose the Wildwood for this. I think it is a deck that's meant to help people through that feeling of lovelessness, meant to help people form that bond. Because if you think about it, like when we feel that the world is loveless, our heart is open, right? Because we wouldn't even be looking for love and noticing the fact that it's loveless if we weren't already looking outside of ourselves. And I think this is a deck that definitely calls for the seeker to look outside of themselves and strive for more. So that was Wildwood. So while lovelessness describes the feeling that there's not enough love around us, like the world is kind of a harsh place, and we're picking up on that and we're noticing it, the next emotion that Brené Brown describes is heartbreak. And I think I have like two different decks for this, but I'm gonna talk through one and then I'm gonna see if the other one feels potent. But like I'll explain the other one too, because I said this. So according to Brené Brown, and this deck is going to be everywhere because it is a circle deck, essentially heartbreak is perceived loss of love or rejection. So I picked Tarot of Cloisters for this one. So the reason that I picked Tarot of Cloisters is because this was one of two decks that my best friend gave me for Christmas this year. And so if I was in a place where I felt like I was heartbroken, like I had been rejected, I definitely would want to go back to the fact that my friend and I have but we both have an affinity for stained glass. And so my friend, who knows next to nothing about tarot, which is kind of ironic because her brother was the first one to ever give me a tarot reading, she knows next to nothing about tarot, but like she looked and looked and looked online and found a deck that I had never seen before. And I was thoroughly impressed with the fact that she managed to get a deck that depicts stained glass, because it was something completely new for me. So I think if I was in a place where I was feeling that deep sense of heartbreak and a deep like perceived loss of love, I would go back to a deep symbol of someone going out of their way to research something for me that they knew that I would like, that reaffirms our bond together. So this would be the deck that I went to through those moments to reassure me that heartbreak might be met like with other different relationships, but there are still relationships in my life that I deeply treasure, that I can always go back to and never be rejected in. I still think it's like really incredible that someone like who knows nothing about tarot like went out of their way to purchase like an out of print deck that fit us. I don't know, I'm like really honored, and I feel like my heart from this gesture was opened up even more. I might start crying in a second if I keep going. And you know, like we had a lot of fun like unboxing this together and like looking at the characters and their absolutely ridiculous faces. Their faces just don't match their bodies at all. I don't know, I think it's beautiful and I think it's fun, and I feel like this Queen of Vessels every time I engage with this deck. So this would be the deck that I turn to if I'm feeling that sense of rejection and like loss of love, that sense of heartbreak. The other deck I would pick for heartbreak, I think, would be Lucille's Clifton's Divining Poets Oracle, or it's a Divining Poets Oracle of Lucille Clifton's poetry. This was actually one of my draws today for the full moon, so I love that. So Lucille Clifton ended up going through a lot of pain in her life. She writes a lot about abortion, about systemic injustices. She writes about the love that she had to gain for her own body. And so I think that a lot of the things that I would feel heartbroken about, if I turned to Lucille Clifton's words and I read the phrase, "It is your own lush self that you hunger for," I think I would feel a sense of camaraderie with that. And so yes, I might have felt that heartbreak and I might have felt that rejection, but I think that Lucille Clifton's words are there to tumble together with me and to help support me through that process. So in a way, this is a deck that just reminds me that other people are going through similar experiences. And I find that when I'm dealing with the feeling of heartbreak or the feeling of rejection, that to be reminded that other people are going through what I'm going through really helps me through this process and through this situation. I pulled this card the other day and I started crying and I put it back. I've been pulling these cards for Tarot Advent, but this one I put right back because I was like, that one hurts a little bit too much, Lucille. Like, I have to put that up. But what better way to engage with that feeling of feeling like you have been like, you've lost love, by running to someone else that has also felt those experiences, and to kind of become like, if without sounding too cheesy, the mad women together at the river's edge. So this deck has become, to me, just like in the last like month and a half, especially through using for Tarot Advent, a trusted friend that I think would help me ride out that heartbreak. So yeah, that was Lucille Clifton's Divining Poets. So the next feeling that Brené Brown describes when the heart is open is trust. And I really love that, because I think that I've always been a trusting person. I think that my acts have always been very trusting, but I think that this year I'm really understanding what that emotion means and the vulnerability of that emotion. So this is one that I deeply relate to. So she claims that for trust, she has like an acronym for it, which is known as braving. So in order for you to like feel a feeling of trust, you have to feel belonging. You have to feel like the person is reliable. The person is like, you can hold that person accountable. That person is a vault for your secrets. That person has integrity. That person is non-judgmental, and that person has generosity. So that is Brené Brown's concept of trust. So for trust, I picked the Witch Sisters. And this deck has been extremely healing to me. I know I've talked about this on my channel before, but I'd like to give you a little update. So today, my best friend and I, she's getting into tarot a little bit more. This is the same person who just got me the Tarot of Cloisters. She's getting into tarot a little bit more, and I thought today we would do a full moon reading. We both have a lot of Gemini in our chart and a lot of Geminis in our life, so I felt like it was the right time. She came over and we did a full moon reading together. And the very last thing that we pulled was a card from this deck of how we can best support each other throughout this month. And for me, I'm supposed to support her through the Magician. She's supposed to support me through the Six of Stones, which, if you know Witch Sister at all, Witch Sister kind of goes its own way. So the basic meaning of that is like by reminding me that like we are connected. So Witch Sister definitely goes its own way. But I chose this deck for it because this deck screams trust. To me, when the heart is open and we're in a place of trust, there has to be a little bit of grittiness to it and a little bit of vulnerability. We have to be met in a place where like we are kind of opening up our hearts and letting someone poke around. And this deck feels like someone is inside of my heart and they're poking it around with a stick, but they're meeting my heart with the same intensity and the same severity of which I'm meeting my own heart, and that I consider my own heart to like deserve that same intensity and severity. This is a deck for me, when you trust someone, there is like a serious level of commitment to that, and your heart is open to engage with that commitment, but they better not like fuck around with it, and like they better not play around with it. I have some like weird, I don't know why I have some reversals mixed in. Anyway, here we go. So I picked this deck for us because I feel like these people they represent the severity and the integrity of that trust. They're a sisterhood of individuals. And to me, it feels more than just friends. It feels like a sisterhood. It feels like the blood that runs between you is blood that indicates that you're on the same wavelength. Like you are connected on a molecular level. And I think that these women deeply understand that, and they understand the power of that bond. But at the same time, I think that this deck holds no punches, right? So when you trust someone, you are able to hold them accountable. And I think that this deck, like this is the Empress, and she looks like a pretty severe Empress. And so that does give me the feeling of trust as well, because I think that like if I got this deck, this Empress in a reading, I wouldn't just thinking about like creation and lushness and all of like the super positive words with the Empress. I would also think about the fact that she's the mother and she's here to hold you accountable. So this is a deck that I engage with when I want to trust other people, when I want to explore those feelings of trust and sisterhood, and what does it mean to love someone and cherish someone enough that you're able to call them out on their bullshit, like this deck will absolutely call you out on yours. And what does it feel like to trust someone that you feel like they're reliable enough to where they're consistent? This deck kind of feels like a stone in that kind of way of how it grounds you into the ground. And I'm very thankful that this deck and I had a moment this year, because I thought that this was going to be a deck that just kind of lavished in my armoire. And since I've been using it for sisterhood readings and for building that sisterhood in my life, I feel like this deck has slotted in. And so it is the deck that represents trust the most for me. It is the deck that makes me want to open myself to trust so that I can be as wise as this old lady and still have people in my life. So that was Witch Sister. So the next emotion that Brené Brown describes is self-trust. And I kind of went back and forth a little bit on this one, on if I wanted to pull Inner Child or if I wanted to pull the Gentle Tarot. And I decided that the Gentle Tarot was the best deck for this purpose. The Inner Child Oracle, Inner Child Tarot just felt a little bit too young. I think when we're a child, we don't have that sense of self-trust. This one feels like a much older deck and much wiser deck in that way. So why do I pull this deck for self-trust? Well, for the most part, the individuals that are portrayed in this deck are completely by themselves. This is actually the card that I thought of when I thought of self-trust, so I will share my interpretation of that with you. So in the guidebook, it talks about how this woman is building this kind of wall with these stones, and this is the pentacles. And so it's saying that she is grounded and she is protected. And behind her, there's like this field of wildflowers, and she is protecting that ground, and she's deeply in tune with that ground. And so there is that sense of the weight of like trust. Like, to trust yourself, you know that you have to have it, but you also have to be practical and you have to be real with yourself. And she knows that what she has to protect. And so there's that element of self-trust in here that she's able to do that. And she's able to ground herself in that appreciation for what she has, but also build this wall to protect it. So this is a deck that is extremely vulnerable in the sense that most of the figures are depicted naked. And I like that a lot for self-trust, because there's a sense of like, I hold myself accountable so much. I rely on myself. I am a vault for myself. I have integrity for myself. I'm in tune enough with nature to be non-judgmental that I literally have stripped away all of my clothes and I'm part of nature. And there's a lot of beauty to that. I think that self-trust is something that is like deeply difficult to do. And when our heart is open, we are really kind of exposing ourselves to pain. And so we have to have that self-trust. But in that way, our heart is open to ourself. So like self-trust means that I trust myself so much that I'm going to hold myself accountable. And so the heart is open to yourself. And isn't that like a beautiful thing? Is that like when you self-trust, it means that you see yourself as like an active participant, and you see yourself as someone that you can trust to get shit done. And I love that. And so, you know, this woman is like in the Eight of Cups, she's walking away, but you can see like on the smile of her face, like she knows that by walking away, she's making the right move for herself. And I greatly appreciate that, because what better act of self-trust is the knowing to walk away when you have to walk away. So Gentle Tarot is beautiful. She's the one I go to when I need to read for myself. She's the reason that I don't use her for other people. I have used this deck to read for my above mentioned best friend, and I think it went fine, but this is a deck that I like to kind of sit and stew with a little bit. This is a deck that holds me accountable. And I think that it's deeply aligned with my vision for life, because I love nature so much and I love interacting with the natural world, and so does Mari in the Sky, that I feel the creator's intentions come through with that. And it's kind of like a kick in the ass that like I need to get outside and engage with nature. And in a sense, that is like the accountability that self-trust comes for. If I'm not living to my own values, then can I trust myself? And so it kicks me in line. So that's the Gentle Tarot. Very well loved, very, very well deserved. I did back the creator's Oracle deck, and I'm really thrilled for it to come in. I'm excited. I love I love everything that Mari and this guy does. And like who she is as a person. All right, what comes next? The next one is betrayal. Okay, I have a lot to share about this. Wow, I have so much that I have to share with this. And I need you to know that of the decks on this list, this is the one that I used for this emotion most recently. So I'm going to get very vulnerable with this one. So this is betrayal. When our heart is open, we feel betrayal. And I'm going to share my Architects deck. This is a newer deck to my collection, so you know that this is, because I've been using it a lot, is a newer emotion that I'm feeling. All right, so I'm deciding how much to share, but it's my YouTube, so fuck it, I'm going to share whatever I want. This needs to be a space to where I can say whatever I want, so I'm just going to go into it. So, I experienced a couple of things recently that opened me up to experiencing the feeling of betrayal. And I definitely think that my heart is open right now. I can literally feel it surging in my heart because I'm able to feel betrayal. Betrayal is the indicator to me that my heart is open. So to start at the beginning, this was the year that I decided to open myself up to connection. And it really all started with the experience that I shared with Tarot Light at the beginning of this video. And since I've made the commitment to open myself up to connection, that also means that I've opened myself up to being hurt. So there was an experience a couple months ago where two people that I deeply, deeply rely on and love did something that they didn't really do something. It was not intentional by any means, but I perceived it to be a betrayal of my trust, because that's what betrayal is. It's a betrayal of trust. And when I spoke to both individuals about it, like they apologized, but like there was really nothing for them to apologize for. I just felt like they had been negligent in a way that I needed them to be more present with me. And then I had a moment a couple weeks ago with my tattoo where I definitely felt a betrayal of trust. You know, you're opening yourself up for someone to create beautiful art on your body, and when they act out of alignment, that you can definitely feel that betrayal. And so I spoke to my therapist about that, and I said, look, I know that I've been in situations where I've been betrayed before, but all of a sudden I am feeling that emotion and I'm knowing what that feels like. And so there was a time 2 months ago, and actually last month, where I was pulling the Three of Swords constantly. And I was like, what the fuck does this mean? I don't understand what this means. Is this grief? Is this heartbreak? What the fuck does it mean? And I got a friend of mine to read for me, and she said, no, you're feeling betrayal. And it's interesting how you can go like 28 years of your life, because I'm 28, and you can experience things that can cause you betrayal, but unless your heart is really open for that connection, it doesn't feel like that trust was broken, right? Because I had never given myself permission to trust other individuals, but I've also never cared enough about relationships to hold people accountable, which is part of trust, like we had already talked about. And so I had never felt that betrayal before. Like I've experienced it, but I've never felt it. And now that I'm feeling betrayal, I'm really proud of myself, because ultimately by feeling betrayal, it means that my heart isn't open enough for that connection. Because if that connection wasn't there to begin with, I wouldn't feel that betrayal of trust. I wouldn't feel that injustice. And so I used the Architects deck to work through that. There is something really gorgeous about this deck that allows me to step back and intellectualize what's going on. I do not think it's like healthy to intellectualize our emotions, but I do think it's healthy to cut through them. And I think betrayal stings like nothing else, because you experience betrayal from trust, right? And trust is almost like the first step of you opening up that heart to go to love. So when you feel that betrayal, your heart is open all of the way. And so I think that you need a deck like Architects to kind of cut through that deep emotional dissatisfaction to be able to experience more. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So I use this deck to help me sift through those feelings of betrayal. I like the fact that the figure is so small and everything around it is so big, because of the different scale of this image, it made me really kind of take a step back and look at the larger picture of what was happening and recognize that there were more factors at play than just myself. And that's what I love this deck so much for, is it's such a big picture kind of image that I can step back and realize that even though betrayal feels deeply personal, because it is, because you've given someone your trust and you deem that they have wronged that, there are other factors that are at play that you need to take into consideration. And you still want to hold them accountable, but if you approach betrayal from a you-centered point of view, instead of looking at the larger picture, you're missing the different things that are happening that allow you to heal that betrayal of trust and to deepen that relationship overall. So I think it's important for you to take in consideration all of the factors, so that way you're keeping your heart open. When we're focusing on just the figure and the card, we're focusing just on us, and therefore we're closing our heart to a resolution. All right, so I just almost showed you, my whole deck on that, but okay. You probably heard the stress in my voice as I was going through that. It's a blessing, right? Like, there's a quote by like Ray Bradbury or someone. No, it's not Ray Bradbury. It's Toni Morrison. And like Toni Morrison says, like, I want to feel what it is that I have to feel, even if it hurts. It's something like that. I'll put it up on the screen. And it's interesting because as a younger adult, I used to say that quote all of the time. And now that I'm old enough and I'm separate enough from a lot of things that have hurt me and I'm working through the process of healing, I'm realizing exactly what that means. There are emotions that we think we felt before, but we haven't always been open to, which is part of the fun of this series, and part of the fun of tarot is getting to sink our teeth into that. All right, so the next one that Brene Brown shares, and we have this one, and then one more is going to be defensiveness, and I knew exactly what deck. So my defensiveness deck, that is so interesting, right? Like, to play with the concept of like your heart is open, but yet you're defensive. So I picked the Crow's Hero for this one. This one's a little bit more straight of a shooter as to why I picked it. So according to Brene Brown, defensiveness occurs when we are trying to protect our ego and our fragile sense of self-esteem. So I knew that this was actually the first deck that I picked. Like, this is the deck that I use for that. So I want to like touch on the concept of like defensiveness if our heart is open. Okay. So if our heart is open, I do think that we are feeling defensive, because if our heart is open, that means that we're also open to how much heartbreak there is in the world and how much betrayal could occur in the world. And so therefore we're on the defense to try to protect ourselves. If our heart wasn't open, we wouldn't be defending it, because if our heart was closed, we wouldn't need to defend it, right? Because it's locked behind walls and it's locked behind like this fortress. So the fact that we're coming at things from a place of defensiveness, I think really does suggest that the heart is open, because it's sensitive and someone could poke at it. So I picked the Crow's Hero to reflect this, because I think that the crows are kind of mean. And so I like to use the crows when I'm reading for big picture ideas and when I've been hurt. I think that the crows are pretty good little guardians. For me, they feel like almost like the buddy you bring to the gym that like wants to hold you accountable. So there's like a little bit of accountability and a little bit of trust here too. But they are going to kick your ass so that way you kind of get into shape. So I know that seems like a little bit of a paradox, right? Like, I'm telling you that these birds will kick your ass so you get into shape, but then I'm also saying that they're protecting you. Well, while they're kicking your ass to get you in shape, they're also protecting you against other people. And so there's kind of a bitterness to these crows, and kind of like a meanness and kind of a grittiness and kind of a squawkiness that kind of keeps other people away. So I like to use this deck when I'm feeling that sense of like I have something to defend, because these crows are almost standing on top of those walls and they're looking out and they're seeing what is out there, and they're taking care of it before I even have to. So since this deck is like a big picture deck, it does warn me of things that could occur to me that could hurt my ego and could hurt my self-esteem, and it kind of acts in that way as like a cautionary deck. So this is my deck for defensiveness. It's very cautionary. It protects my self-esteem by giving me a heads up of what's out there, and then also acting kind of like in a sense of like my familiar. Like it's going to stand on top of that gate and protect me from other people trying to hurt me. The Crows, it's a deck that I went 180 on. This is a deck that I didn't use for a while. Similar to the Witch Sister. I didn't use the Witch Sister for a while. I didn't use Wildwood for a while. There are a lot of decks on this list that like I've almost given away. And then all of a sudden at this part of my life, I'm grabbing them. And maybe it's because how I'm describing how I'm using them in this video is how I'm using them right now in real life. Like I'm very much in the cycle of my heart being open and all the beauty and all of the consequences of that. So maybe this is just the time for them to be here. Alrighty, next one. I've been feeling this one quite a bit too. So the next one, I've never really considered this to be an emotion, but it definitely seems like a state of being, and that's going to be flooding. So here is my deck for flooding. This is my Tarot Landscapes. I have not brought this out in a couple weeks, and I think it's time for it to come out. I probably will use it more because I've been feeling a sense of flooding. This deck has a terrible bow. I've like barely used it and he has a terrible bow, but c'est la vie. Okay, Tarot Landscapes. I think he's in the middle enough. So according to Brene Brown, flooding is when your body is overwhelmed, when it feels attacked, and when it feels confused. So you are quite literally being flooded with emotion. I like to use this deck to validate for me that my body is being flooded with emotion. So in most of these images, the animal is actually quite small and the landscape is quite expansive. So it's for me, like this is literally what flooding feels like. It feels like I'm this tiny little fish and I have just this like burst of like emotions that's coming onto me. And that of course happens with our heart is open, because when our heart is open, we are receiving all of these different emotions at once, and that can feel very overstimulating and overwhelming. And so that's what I see flooding to be. I am this tiny animal and like this water is just kind of whooshing around me, and I'm here and like I'm so small, but we have like this vast giant set of emotions kind of coming towards me. So I like to use it because it validates that experience for me. This deck feels very lonely, so I like to use it for shadow work in that sense, but it also feels very bleak, but it also feels at the same time like I think the loneliness and the bleakness comes from the fact that here we are as like these tiny little animals and we're facing this natural environment alone. So there's a sense of validation to that. But I think I also want to use this for flooding, because when I'm experiencing that experience of being like flooded with emotions, I have to ground. And so it's really hard for me to do so during the school months towards the end of the year. I'm trying my best this winter, and I will say this winter has been better than previous ones, to open myself up to connection and follow that open heart so that I don't experience like sad. And I think I'm doing better this year, but I think that there are days that I overwork myself and I really just need to put my feet into the ground. So there's a sense of, for me, I'm feeling a lot of overwhelm and a lot of anxiety right now with work because I'm working so much. I do teach the college classes, so like it is finals week. And so this deck is an invaluable tool to me because it reminds me to literally go outside and stick my feet in the dirt and like literally lay on the ground. I mean, this is Tarot Landscapes, so that's exactly what it wants you to do. It wants you to focus less on yourself and more about what's around you and feeling the comfort of that ground and what's around you, to really get into a place where you can handle that overstimulation. I need to bring this deck back out. This deck was on my desk for a while and I was using it with Under the Oak. This was my reality deck, and then Under the Oak, because it's a fantasy world, was like my fantasy deck. And I put them away because I got some new stuff in, but I think this is a deck that I need this week. So this is where I am. I'm kind of working through my betrayal with my therapist. So we have like Architect's Tarot for that. This is going to be the one that I feel when I'm feeling flooded. I'll be honest, like, because I'm feeling like these categories of emotion so strongly, I could probably keep all these decks out on my desk and be fine. And actually, as a matter of fact, I think out of all the decks that I showed today, like more than half of them were already out on my reading desk. Like, and I never read with crows and I never read with witch sisters, but hey, it's where I am right now. So this was another video in my tarot mood reader series. Let me know if y'all like this kind of content, because I really like getting in a space in here where I feel deeply contemplative. And I think that this is an important way for me to spend my time, is like thinking about how I use my decks for specific emotional states and conditions, and how tarot really kind of supports my emotional well-being in that way. So I appreciate y'all being here. If y'all made it here to the end, that means that you probably hit like a whirlwind of emotions as I was going through this. So I appreciate y'all. And once again, thank y'all for building this community with me. So if you could, I would really appreciate it if y'all could like this, and I will see y'all next time.